Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Spoiler Warning Podcast. This is review number 696 with a review of The Batman. I'm Christopher Schnese.
And I'm Stephen Miller.
And if you're joining us for the first time, the Spoiler Warning Podcast is a weekly film review program. Each week in the show, we're going to dive in, debate, discuss, and argue over the latest films coming to a theater near you.
Oh, shit.
This week, we're doing it again. Another huge film came to theaters. We ventured our way into the theaters to see it, and now we're going to talk about it. The latest The Batman film is here, and were you excited to see it, Stephen?
When I realized it was about to come out, like a few days before, I was pretty excited. But leading up to it, I don't know, I hadn't read much about it. I hadn't really internalized any kind of expectation about the movie, and it felt like we had gotten Batman so recently because of Zack Snyder's Justice League happening. So I didn't have a lot of excitement or negativity. I just was kind of like not feeling anything. And then maybe the day or two before, when I realized like I'm about to see a 3-hour Batman movie, I felt a little tingle. To cross different companies, my spidey senses were tingling that I would enjoy it.
There might be other ways to cross of those things. There's definitely something I want to reference when it comes to Spider-Man as well later on in this this episode. But yeah, I think that this is, I haven't really been paying attention to releases as much, obviously, with COVID and how that's changed my theatrical watching behaviors. But I definitely, as soon as I got the email from Alamo that was like, this is available for purchase, I was like, I don't even know if I'm going to watch this, but I bought that ticket instantly and was like, okay. Definitely excited for this. I remember when they first announced they were doing another Batman film, I wasn't necessarily the most excited. But once that first trailer dropped, I was kind of like, all right, I'm fucking in for this movie. This looks fucking amazing. And I was really excited to be returning to the theater to see this film on the big screen. I think it's safe to say we're both huge fans of the Nolan Batman films. I assume that we both enjoyed the cartoon Batmans from back in the day.
We did. Yeah, we did. Though I was never really a WB kid, so I only really watched it when I was at friend's house.
Okay.
And by then, I think Batman... what was it called? It was like the hip, newer Batman where there was an older Bruce Wayne who was
it Batman Beyond?
Yeah, Batman Beyond. Yeah, Batman Beyond was kind of my shit by the time I was at a friend's house and we were watching WB together. But yeah, the cartoons are rad. We also both, controversially for a film podcast for people who claim to love movies, we both were quite high on Joker, which is not the common consensus, but is a uniform consensus among spoiler warning hosts, current and past. So we've cultivated something together, some kind of opinion that is unlike other people.
That's true. And that The Joker, another film that will be easily able to weave its way into the conversation we're going to have here tonight on this episode. But yeah, I think we've had fun with the characters. I've definitely criticized the character of Batman with regards to the Justice League's films because it felt like he was ancillary, and even though he was the one that was motivating the forming of the group and pushing all the we need to deal with Superman stuff, he sort of seemed like the one person who didn't fit with the group. But I think in general, I've been a fan of the character of Batman. I think neither of us have really gotten into comics at all over the histories of our lives, so we're not bringing that into this conversation. But we do have a fondness for the character when it's deployed correctly, or in a way that we jive with. So we're definitely going to talk here tonight if this time around the Batman did that for us. Excited to get into this, Stephen?
Oh, yeah.
All right. We're going to take a listen to the trailer for The Batman, and then we're going to come back and give you a review.
Police! Hands up! Stay still! Get out of here!
Fear is a tool. But when that light hits the sky, It's not just a call. It's a warning. I've been trying to reach you. Find the gun! This is a powder keg, and Riddler's the match.
I can take care of myself.
If this continues, it won't be long before you've nothing left.
I don't care what happens to me.
It's only gonna get worse for you.
Whoa, take it easy, sweetheart. Hear everything they say, ain't you?
Maybe we're not so different. Who are you under there?
I'm vengeance. What's black and blue and dead all over? You. Take up.
I got you! I got you!
All right, so that was the trailer for The Batman. In this story, Batman's city of Gotham is having high-powered people around the city killed by this man that is known as the Riddler. At each of these murders, clues are left behind that specifically call out Batman, and he has to try to solve the clues that are being left by the Riddler and stop whatever the hell's happening in his city. Stephen Miller, what did you think of The Batman?
I thought this movie was pretty fantastic. I was very surprised and impressed with just how much I liked this movie. Immediately, I don't know that this is that much of a twist for the Batman franchise so much as it is just doing it so goddamn well. It is kind of like the most of something in a way that others haven't been. Like, you know, we referenced Joker before. There are tons of things that make this similar to Joker. Like, very specific things we'll get into in spoilers, but also the idea of like channeling in a very dark, gritty world using like 70s imagery to make it feel like a kind of crime-addled New York City, really dealing in like the corruption and the malcontent of the city, the citizens of Gotham, turning the question of a hero kind of on its head a bit. It is doing a lot of the things that was doing. It is also really following in Nolan's footsteps, I think. Like, this is the closest thing to The Dark Knight that I've seen in theaters since The Dark Knight. And I don't just mean in terms of Batman movies, I mean in terms of movies. Like, the way that it is just a heavy, much more than 2 hours of pushing you through different, like, layers of intensity following a villain and still keeps you on your toes for the whole time. There aren't a lot of movies that can have that effect, and this is one of them, and I feel like that is very, very impressive. But I think this movie goes places that Nolan wouldn't go, and I think that is awesome. You know, like if Christopher Nolan did The Dark Knight Rises, where he's like, okay, I've plumbed the depths of Batman, and now I'm going to turn it into a question of what he represents to the world and turn it into more of like a traditional superhero fare. This movie is like, I'm going to plumb the depths of Batman, and the depths are going to be a whole lot darker and grittier, and I'm going to just keep digging further and further, and make the audience sit through it. two amazing results. I think turning Batman into a detective is great. I think the Riddler as a kind of Zodiac killer character is goddamn inspired. And maybe the comics this is based on did that already. I don't know what is new to this movie and what is a part of the lore, but I loved it. I thought that was just like incredibly clever. It instantly puts you in this dark David Fincher-y type world as you follow what is this guy going to do? I also love that it is an origin story for Batman, even though it isn't about how he puts on the cape and, you know, the killing of his parents and all that stuff. It's an origin story for how this fucked up vigilante becomes a hero. And I love that it does what Zack Snyder wanted to do with Batman v Superman, where it paints him as kind of the not quite hero at first, the guy who is like so hell-bent on vengeance that he might miss the forest for the trees. But it does it in a way that, by making it a kind of like noir procedural that puts him at the middle, it makes you like go on a journey with him through the seedy underbelly of Gotham and arrive at a like slightly more hopeful place in the end. I loved it. I love that this movie could keep my attention for 3 hours and make me wish it were an hour longer. I feel like that is like the highest praise I could give it. And I love that even though I have plenty of nitpicks if I want to focus on them about the movie. I think like there are exposition dumps in the middle of this movie that do not need to exist. There are lengthy conversations between pairs of people that explain stuff that if you cut like 80% of it, the movie would work great and probably be better. The clues that Batman pieces together are mostly obvious, and the only reason I don't care about that is the clues are not the point at all. The point is all this like seedy Gotham in the rain with, you know, late night clubs within clubs and corrupt cops and drug dealers. This is the closest I felt to playing the Max Payne video game in 20 years was watching this movie. And I was just hooked on it. I think Robert Pattinson is great. I think Paul Dano does a great job as the Riddler. Zoe Kravitz, I think, is an awesome Catwoman. And pairing this like right after Kimmy was also kind of a fun experience. Yeah. I think like Colin Farrell is unrecognizable as Penguin, but he's so goddamn good as that. The version of me that watched The Sopranos like twice in the last 2 years was so into all of the like the corrupt criminal element of this world. Carmine Falcone, John Turturro, Jeffrey Wright as Gordon is such a kind of like effortless twist on the character, and he makes it work. That the movie is just so clever about how it weaves in modern day social feelings about the police, about eating the rich, about like the nature of power and who should wield violence and what should we glorify and what shouldn't we. I think it is so clever about how it does that in a way that still makes it ugly. It doesn't make it a kind of like polished 2022 flawless, I am going to present the perfect smooth hero. It just is like, I understand all the things that you are thinking about right now, and I am going to leverage that to make a very, very interesting, gritty superhero movie that isn't as dour and self-serious as Zack Snyder is when he tries to do it, but it also isn't like self-deprecating the way like Joss Whedon is with his character. Like it is just right there in the middle in a way that I think is great. So yeah, I thought this movie, even if it didn't need a third of the movie, I just loved the world so much. I don't care. I would have watched it all day.
Yeah, it's funny that, like, you know, before we even sat down to watch this, the one thing that, like, most people know or should know going in is this is basically a 3-hour movie. With the trailers and all the opening bullshit that you get at a theater, it's like 3 hours, 11 minutes or something like that.
Yeah.
So it's something that, like, you know, you're in for the long haul, and never once did I feel like this film was running long. In fact, there was a scene in a diner where I was like, dear God, don't let this movie be over right now. And I was like, thank God there's like 20 more minutes left. Where it was just like, I was like, there's no way they're just going to leave us right here. This is insane. So it was like, I wanted more from this film. I think from the go, I was just completely drawn in and in love with what I was watching. You know, over the course of, you know, several different films in the, you know, DC world, you know, they have talked about heroes as symbols and what that symbol stands for, and cities that need that symbol to exist, whether or not the hero is still in the city or still a thing, right? In Christopher Nolan's Batman films, there's times when Batman has disappeared, but the city needed him, and somebody has to convince him to come back and be that hero again. And I think that, like, in that talk of what the symbol is, the symbol has always been for the people of the city. Mm-hmm. This symbol exists as hope for the citizens of Gotham to be a protector that will help them. When this film starts, that symbol is not of hope for the people. It is of fear for the criminals. And this is the first time, and maybe I'm just forgetting it, but this is the first time I really, really felt the sense of bad guys being scared of the Dark Knight, of any shadows, because there could always be the Batman lurking in that space. Like, just all the scenes of somebody doing something bad, you know, assaulting somebody, stealing something from a place, and then looking into the shadow and not knowing if Batman was going to come from that shadow and attack them, and then just not really policing themselves, but just running in fear, cowering of what's going to be there. The Batman that we are introduced to this, we were introduced to Batman 2 years after he has become Batman. And he is just a wholly broken person. Like, in the trailer, in the film, he doesn't even refer to himself as the Batman. He says, "I am vengeance." And that is literally what he is. He has a line in this film where he's talking about a moment in his life where he has felt fear unlike anything he's ever felt before. And his entire purpose is to never feel that feeling again. But that's not really his purpose. His purpose is to make others who make others feel that way themselves, right? Like, his whole thing, he embodies this force that is like the slasher in a movie, where he just comes at you, not freakishly fast, or he's not like this ninja who's gonna like pop out of the shadows and be like, get everybody. He just comes at you and just unleashes all hell on anybody who is doing wrong. And it's almost like in that moment, he is building himself into a fugue state of sorts, and then he's just going to kick the shit out of all evildoers and then calm down. It's like he can't even attack them until he has worked himself into that frenzy. And there's something deeply troubling and intriguing about that version of Batman as being this just pure force of vengeance, and really he's not doing good in the world. He is putting forth more hurt and pain. He's just directing it. He's like a weird perverse version of Dexter, right?
Yeah.
And like, obviously over the course of this film, he has to learn whether or not that is the best use of the thing that he is trying to be. But I was just really impressed with just that whole opening of seeing these moments where Batman doesn't even have to be there in order to strike fear in the hearts of villains. And I was just like really intrigued with that. Beyond that, like, I really liked, like you talked about making Batman a detective, and from the lore of the character of Batman, that is a thing definitely in the comics, right? Mm-hmm. He is supposed to be the world's greatest detective. But like, we are used to, at least most recently in like the Snyderverse, right? It's like Batman is working with a team to like stop the God boxes or whatever. The mother boxes, and it's like that kind of shit. I'm not cared. What I am more interested in is, and the reference back to Spider-Man is him being the friendly neighborhood Batman who is just going around the city and helping out where somebody needs to be helped, right? Like, that was really, really compelling. And the fact that like everyone is scared of him, even like the police are scared of him, right? Like, nobody knows if they can trust him, but this one killer has started putting clues that directly call Batman to participate in this, and how he just exists as this force that like freaks the shit out of everybody as he slowly just walks through all these crime scenes. Like, watching him just do the procedural part was really, really intriguing. Was I trying to solve every riddle as they came? I didn't really care, because it was mostly like either it was going to be a thing where they were going to take us on a wild goose chase to solve one riddle, or it was going to be like And as somebody's finishing the end of the sentence, justice is the answer to the riddle, right? Like he's immediately solving it. So it's like, I wasn't even putting brain power towards like trying to like be in on what the next riddle is going to mean. I was just watching this character of like, shit, another gnarly murder has happened. What does this mean? And watching them go. I just really, really enjoyed being in this version of Gotham, just this rain-soaked, dark, gritty world where like everything was kind of like, is anybody happy in this world? I just thought it was an incredible world to exhibit for 3 hours, and also the fucking action is amazing.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good. And one of my favorite things about this, which I'm sure everybody's commenting on, is just the Batmobile is so fucking badass.
Oh yeah, so cool.
What I love too is the build up to it. Right, this isn't like it isn't like in the Dark Knight or the Nolanverse films where it's like Batman is looking at plans, talking about military contracts, and then you get introduced to this like armored gnarly thing. It's just all the scenes in the Bat Lair train station thing that he has, you just see the car lit from behind, covered in a shroud, and you see the engine block on a separate thing. And it's like, he's never working on it. You don't see it. It's just a thing that you know exists. It's like Chekhov's Batmobile just waiting to fucking show up. And then just when that engine starts up and that fucking like thing is just heating up in the back. And I was like, oh my God. Like I am not a car person, which is a weird thing to say for two people who work for an automotive company. But like just the fucking sound of the engine revving up and like the fucking whatever the other thing is that's like causing that high pitched whine. I was just like, oh my God, I love being in a theater. I love whatever's about to happen. Just fucking rev that shit. This is so great.
Yep. I completely agree. I think what is interesting is I loved the action in this movie. And when I was thinking through it, I had trouble enumerating all the action scenes because there's so much like space between the action in this movie and the tone of just building this world of menace that he wades in is so heavy that it doesn't need the kind of constant big fights. This isn't one of those movies that have like, it not only doesn't have constant action sequences, it also doesn't have like one giant 30-minute thing in the middle of the movie or whatever either. Like, I think the Batmobile scene is the closest you get to that. But in terms of the plot of the movie, that's just like one of many of the things that they go through. And some of the things they go through have no fighting at all. I don't know. It's just such an interesting blend. But when I think about this compared to the Joker, because both are like extremely heavy worlds that are being built that suck you into this like dark intensity that you can't look away from. At least, you know, that was how I felt. I know other people felt differently about the Joker, but Joker is like 95% Joaquin Phoenix, right? It is a character study of one person. And the whole time you are thinking, what am I watching? Who is this guy? What is he going to do next? And that is the thing you can't look away from. What is amazing to me about this movie is the load balancing is just perfect. Like, it isn't only Batman. It isn't only the Riddler. It isn't only Penguin. It isn't only Catwoman. The universe is so good at that intensity. You could lose a piece and it would still be incredibly captivating. Yeah. And I don't really know how that cocktail works. Like, the movie is centered around the Riddler doing his kind of, you know, Seven or Zodiac or whatever style series of clues. And that is amazing, but there are huge stretches of the movie where he isn't doing jack shit. Like, it has nothing to do with him anymore. Yeah. And the movie still works great because it isn't like The Dark Knight where the Joker is the threat. Like, the threat is the whole corrupt world and Bruce not knowing his place in that world. And it's just a very intricately designed movie that I'm very, very impressed by how evenly it manages to spread the heaviness. So it never feels like dour to the point that you want it to be over. It is like just heavy enough to keep your heart racing. I think my favorite scene, if I had to pick one, and we can in spoilers maybe talk more about actual parts of the movie. But there is a scene that happens at a public gathering, maybe like an hour into the movie, that I think that would give any dark twist in a Nolan Batman movie a run for its money in terms of just how, like, it feels to me like the equivalent of the bank heist at the beginning of The Dark Knight, where it's like, here is how menacing broad daylight can be in a world where you can't trust other people. And I don't know, we can talk about it in spoilers, but I just think that...
Is it a location where people dress in a very specific way? Not, it's...
Yes. Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, people dress in a very specific way. But I don't mean the end of the movie where a thing happens that has happened in quite a few movies lately. There's just something about the, like, just how haunting and heavy and how, like, heart palpitating that scene is, even as it is extended and extended and extended. And it isn't like, here is heavy action taking place. People aren't punching each other. It isn't shrouded in fire or night or whatever. It's just like the world is so grimy that I don't know, it just had me. That was when I knew the movie had me, and I was like, you can take me wherever you want. I'm in the palm of your hand now.
Yeah.
Like, you know what to do with me.
Yeah, I think it's super interesting, and it's I also like to like related to the scene you're talking about is Peter Sarsgaard's character. Like, it's kind of showing that all of the corrupt people are not comedically evil and corrupt in that way. Like, his character is very much in over his head, has to participate in this game, but like from the moment you start interacting with him, he's sort of not he's not hugely actively evil. He is just somebody who was trapped in the system and had to participate in a way, knows information, and is, not trying to just get ahead in the world. He's sort of just victim as well, but he is, victim in multiple ways.
Right.
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he's a victim to a corrupt system, and he participates in the corruption.
Yeah,
I think, like, one thing that I think is very clever about the movie is you talked about Batman being this, like, perverse version of Dexter, like this character who is a symbol of fear for other criminals, and it isn't clear at all that what he is doing is good. It isn't necessarily benefiting the world at all. And what's interesting is this is a movie that deals with police corruption and police violence. And, like, there are moments where Batman is threatened by the police in a way that is very much like, shit, you need to get out of here. Like, we cannot trust our law enforcement to treat you with care. And it's interesting because Batman is the police at the beginning. Like, he is the heavily armed guy who's going to come and take an already violent situation and meet it with double the violence. And the things that make Batman ugly and terrifying at the beginning of the movie are the same things that make the Gotham police force ugly and terrifying. And it is interesting that they are still on opposite sides at the beginning of the movie, because I think thematically they are both. Batman begins as, like, the Punisher, right? He begins as the character that, like, the terrible, like, alt-right people today would worship and would have, like, have a YouTube channel devoted to, like, filming him in little snippets and talking about what a badass he is. And I don't know, I just think that is one of the things this movie does so interestingly, is it, like, it steers into the valid criticism of these, like, dark crime fighting people, and it tilts you, like, toward a hopeful outcome, but it doesn't sugarcoat just how heavy and shitty it all can be. And I don't know, I was really impressed with that. I will say, in spoilers, there are two moments where the shadowing of real world events felt a little too direct to me.
Yeah.
I no longer knew how comfortable I was with the imagery they were using, but we'll get there in the spoiler section.
Yeah. Cool. Any more non-spoiler things that you want to talk about before we head down that path?
So one thing that I think is interesting about this movie is Batman is the protagonist but it's hard to say he's a hero. Like, the story of the movie is him failing over and over and over again, which is normal. Like, that is a normal kind of twisty procedural thing to happen. It is a person following a villain, following a world that is revealing more of its evil to him, and him being basically powerless to prevent any of it. Yeah. And it's just interesting in a superhero movie how you don't get many moments of like, aha, he got him. Good job, Batman. Like, every victory is like a part of losing to the Riddler's plan for most of the movie. And I like that. It was just another thing that I think set this movie apart.
Well, I mean, part of the point of this story is that you can't achieve bettering the world with fists. Like, it's just not going to happen. You can't do that. Yes, you can beat the shit out of criminals, but all you're doing is beating the shit out of criminals. You're not actually affecting any meaningful change in the world. So one thing that you'll have to talk with me about in spoilers is, at what point in the movie do you think Batman is bettering the world? Because I think what you just said, there's one key moment that it could be, but then literally speaking, I think the previous 30 minutes he's been bettering the world, and well, we can talk about it. It's an interesting image. Without getting into spoilers, I think that the point of this movie is that he will try to do better moving forward. I don't think there's any point in this film where he is actively bettering the world. I think he has simply learned by the end of this film that what he has been doing is not the way.
Right.
And I think that's kind of like where we're at. And it might take him witnessing other acts of vigilantism to change that in him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's probably about time that we get ready to transition into spoilers. So for now, Stephen Miller, why don't we go ahead and get to verdicts? If you were going to give us a must-see, recommend with a caveat, wait for rental, pass with a caveat, or must avoid, what would you give it?
Must-see. I think this is the darkest Batman movie to date, as far as I'm concerned, but that doesn't make it the heaviest or most unpleasant. It all comes down to load balancing. Like, it finds a way to like distribute all the like intensity in a way that just goes down real easy. I think this is a phenomenal theatrical experience, like, because you can just feel the whole audience being in the clutch of whatever this movie is doing in a way that I honestly can't remember feeling since the Dark Knight premiere. Like, just the feeling that the whole audience is like being pulled at the same time by the story.
Yeah.
So I think it is super impressive. Love Pattinson's take on Batman. Yeah, I think it's great. I want to see like Batman and Robin and Batman Forever and all the other Batmans after this with this cast of characters, because I think it is going to kick ass.
Yeah. This is going to be a must-see from me. I thought it was phenomenal. I really, really loved it. I do think it has that heaviness. The reason why it feels like in aggregate it isn't is because you have 3 hours to divide amongst all the heaviness. Like I really think that this tortured version of Batman, the more you actually think and get into his head, the darker it really feels that this character is. Like I really think that in that moment when he hurts somebody, he is reliving his past trauma in that exact moment, and he is purposely feeding into that and really building himself. It's like he is, the Hulk going, "I'm always angry," just like turning into that monster in that moment, Hulk smashing, and then like bringing himself back down, and then going back to his emo life of sitting in his tower or his basement and just kind of like hiding away from the world. So it's like I was really captivated by just this take on who this character is.
Now, I guess one question is, in future movies, when he is a hero without an asterisk, do you think that take will translate?
I mean, I don't know. We'll see in the next movie when it's 90 minutes and he's just a hero.
Yep.
It's hard to tell. We also, who knows if they'll actually in earnest continue it in the same way, or if it'll be a different thing where he exists as part of this world, but it's following the Joker or someone.
Right.
But yeah, so that is it for the non-spoiler segment of this review. For anybody who's not going to stick around with us, Stephen Miller, if people want to find his Reds Week, where can they do that?
People can find me at twitter.com/sdavidmiller or sdavidmiller.com.
People can find me at ChristopherInRealLife.com or Twitter.com/ChristopherIRL. You can find the podcast over at thespoilerwarning.com, where you can get a bunch of the back episodes of the show. If you want to subscribe to the show, you can do so on Overcast, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever podcasts are found. If you want to know the episodes go live, you can follow us at Twitter.com/SpoilerWarning, Facebook.com/TheSpoilerWarning, or Instagram.com/TheSpoilerWarning. If you want to get hold of us directly, you can send an email to fans@thespoilerwarning.com, or you can use the contact form on our site. Music for this episode will be a track selected from artist.io. Yeah, that track is playing right now. That's going to fade up. After a few short moments, that music's going to fade out again, and we're going to be in full-blown spoilers. So watch out for the shadows, because in any shadow, there could just be a spoiler just waiting there to rain down vengeance upon you. All right, we are back. This is spoiler territory. It's sort of the bat cave of the Spoiler Warning podcast, where we gather up all of our intel and talk about full-blown spoilers for the film that we just reviewed. Of course, we're talking about The Batman. Steven, do you want to start? You had one main topic to hit first. Do you want to start there?
Yeah, so the main thing I wanted to get to is the real life parallels in terms of violence that this movie points to, and there are two in particular. The first one that left a strange taste in my mouth, and I still don't know exactly how I feel about it, is the opening of this movie. In the opening of the movie, there is a gang of very Joker movie-esque, bad guys on the subway, and one man who is clearly the targeted victim of some hazing ritual that they have decided that a gang member needs to do in order to be initiated.
Yeah.
And that man is an older Asian man. And as far as I know, it is the only Asian character in the movie. And at least to me, in that moment, it felt very explicit that it was dwelling on the kind of real anti-Asian violence that has been happening, where there are like random acts of violence against Asian people, especially in New York City.
Yeah.
And I am not saying a movie can or can't traffic in that kind of imagery, but I, in that moment, had a little red alert go up of like, how is it going to handle this? Because this is a very, very, very loaded concept that the movie is doing.
Yeah.
It didn't ultimately linger that much for me, maybe because the moment Batman appears, he doesn't just save the day and then we laugh and it ends. Like, he himself becomes a kind of symbol of heavy violence and vengeance that also terrifies the man. And so I don't know how to explain it, but the fact that it doesn't just make that real world darkness be like but look at the hero, isn't he great? And instead makes it be like, look, the whole world is shitty, including the hero.
Yeah.
It made it linger less. Like, honestly, I didn't remember my reservation until someone brought it up like a day later on the internet. But that was just one where I felt like, what are you doing, movie? This is so fresh in everyone's minds, and maybe it's a coincidence. I don't know when the movie was filmed, but I don't know, that just like was a sour note for the movie to open on for me.
Yeah.
And then the second one, which we actually had a listener write in and also reference, is at the end of the movie, it has been revealed that the Riddler has a QAnon type following, who is tracking his every move. Is tracking his every move while he like torments Gotham, and then they all plan a kind of mass shooting event that they will participate in. And there's no one real world thing that felt a lot like.
Well,
but the idea of
it's not just that they're planning a massive. It is the opposition candidate for mayor has won the election, and this is her should be inaugural speech where she is taking the power away from the previous candidate, and it is these people who have made their way to with the sole purpose of dethrone, like not allowing her to take power. And
very January 6th in its imagery. And that, again, I wasn't left thinking, like, are you allowed to do this? But I definitely squirmed a little bit, just because the movie is so good at being heavy and commenting on real world social things without needing those literal parallels. When it does go literal, I'm kind of like, you didn't even need that literal. Like, we got it as a metaphor, you know, we didn't need it to literally happen. So that was just kind of how I felt in both of those moments. Like, compare that to Bruce Wayne realizing or believing he has realized that Thomas Wayne was in cahoots with the mob and paid to have a reporter killed. You know, that has so much to say about our relationship to billionaires today and how we think about power and the sacrifices that, like, the moral compromises that come with power and our kind of changing relationship to, like, that was very 2022, even though it wasn't literally about anything at all that has happened in the last year. Because the movie is just like trafficking in thoughts that we have all had. And when it traffics in actual imagery we've all seen, it feels a little like unnecessary to me.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think it feels like it started as a commentary about vigilantism in more generally. And it was too close to reality to not steer into it. Right. Like, it would have been one thing if it just, like, if you're making something that has direct parallels to actual events that transpired and you're not directly homaging it, it'll still feel like you're homaging it. So why not use it as a way to say, like, this is the danger of this situation, is that stuff like this can transpire. And I think that, like, it's sort of, to me, it felt more, it felt like it was a cautionary tale rather than just evoking the imagery, right? Like, it's not like just, you know, showing the Twin Towers falling as a short form version of like mass tragedy. Like
another Robert Pattinson movie.
But you know what I mean, though?
Yeah.
So for me, it was definitely charged, but it was charged in the sense that I was like, yeah, this is what happens. Because that's the interesting thing is, and, you know, we can get in. I don't know. Is this the perfect time to get into the listener's email?
Yeah. Let's do it. Also, because I'm pouring a beer.
All right. While you do that, I'll take a look at this email. So Ryan from San Diego wrote in and was kind of comparing some things from the Joker and the Batman, and then talked about what the Riddler's actual plan was by the end of the film. So I'm not going to read the whole thing. We're just going to hit a few things here. In both the Joker and the Batman, the movie focuses on motivating a group of internet wackos to cause havoc and kill civilians. Over the course of the film, the Riddler suddenly switches his plan to killing civilians. So the entire movie was about exposing the truth and killing corrupt people. Then it was cause a mass flood and kill tons of people. Why was the change in what the Riddler was doing? So this is sort of the subject matter that we're hitting right now. And thanks, obviously, for that email, Ryan. But for me, I think that this is a cautionary tale about the dangers of where vigilantism goes and where you can start out as being somebody who sees a problem and tries to fix that, and how that can build to being entirely misguided, right? So the Riddler's massive plan was to publicly take out the top leaders of the government in Gotham and show the world all of their corruption. But by the end, I don't think his plan actually changed. He thinks Gotham itself is literally corrupt through and through, and the only way to destroy the corruption is to literally rebuild Gotham from the ground up. And he is trying to flood the entire city to kind of literally clear out everything and allow people to start anew and build a new society that is not beholden to the entire system that has built everything up until that moment. And I think that there was one way you could read it where he had his plan, and then the other vigilantes that were following him kind of took it one step too far and then switched to trying to assassinate the new candidate for mayor. But I think that obviously he was trying to literally destroy the whole city. So I think that they were still in cahoots and still working on the same plan. And it was really just burn it all down, and then we can start from scratch with those of us that survive what is coming. And I think that it really just shows that, like, yeah, things seem like insanity when it's the people who are opposed to your point of view, right? But what would it take for your point of view to cause you to do something insane if you were trying to just fix a wrong that was in the world? And I don't know. There's something interesting there.
Yeah, well, so to me, what is still interesting, and I'm unfortunately not saying it isn't realistic, but I still when I think about real life things like QAnon or something, the theory is, rooted as usual in truth, that there's like heavy corruption happening in the government and everywhere else in our systems. And so the QAnon idea is that, like, someone behind the scenes, some Batman type figure, if you will, is like undoing the corruption, is righting the wrongs, is going to like bring out into the light all the people who are doing wrongdoing, and will destroy the deep state and give it back to the people. The Riddler's followers, when they plan on flooding Gotham and starting anew, do they think they are a part of the rot? Like, why should they not be among the people drowning?
Because they're
what is them versus others in their mind?
They're like the red pill people who see the reality of how corrupt the world is. So they are the people passing the, like, they're the cleansing force that will rid the city of the corruption, which is everybody. So for me, what's really interesting about comparing the Batman and the Joker, the films, and the specific characters is look at the comparison of the Riddler and the Batman. The whole reason the Riddler is motivated to start acting is he is motivated by seeing Batman and his presence in the world and how Batman is a force for good. And the Riddler is so corrupted in his support for the Batman that he thinks they're working together. The reason for all the clues is to direct the vengeance that is the Batman to his targets to help. Like the whole big reveal later on, which we also have to talk to, because it was a weird fake twist that turns into a separate twist that works really well for the Riddler, not so well for the Batman arc. And we'll get to that in a moment. But like you're watching a character who the Riddler and the Batman are the same. They are quite literally the same person. They have the same background as the Joker in the Joker film, where it's a person who was wronged, who is taking it upon themselves to channel what has happened to them into them taking action upon other people. And it just happens to be that in the Joker is the bad guy. He is doing things that we all agree are bad, and the Batman is theoretically doing something that we all agree is good, in that he is taking out bad guys. But like when you see his presence, he is just a sheer, like, he is vengeance, and that is it. He is not he's not a scalpel cutting out a bad tumor. He is just fucking, there's a tumor in the arm, rip the arm off.
Yeah.
And he is the quote hero of our story, but he is just as much a scourge on the city, I think, as the Riddler is, as the Joker is in his film. It's just that he theoretically has the name of justice behind him. At least he is shouting it. And there's not a lot different in the motivation behind what Batman is doing and what the Riddler is doing. The only difference is the result and how we see the person taking the action. So it's just, I think there's an interesting thought experiment to compare these two characters in these two films and say, like, at what point do we all just become the bad guy? And not in the Christopher Nolan live long enough to become the villain or whatever.
Yep.
But in the sense of like, how far can you go in the act of good before you are doing bad? And that's, I think, a lesson that the Batman has to learn in this film, that he shouldn't be focusing his attention on hurting bad people, but helping good people. And it's literally not until he's, submerged in water with the rumbles of Gotham around him that he's realizing that, like, oh, maybe I can outstretch a hand instead of punch a fist.
Yeah. Yeah, because I definitely think, to our earlier, conversation about when does he finally turn into becoming the hero, then I definitely think it is symbolically that moment, right, where he is like shining a light, he's reaching out his hand, he is just helping people who need help.
Yeah.
But this is where it's always weird to watch a superhero movie, because none of that would have been possible if he hadn't punched out all the baddies on the roof a second ago, And so there's always this tug of war between the message that says, like, helping others is the only real thing and violence begets more violence, and then the plot machinations that force violence to be the only way to make it safe again. And you could say he's digging himself out of a hole, right? Like, he helped make this mess, and so now he's punching his way out of it.
He's
maybe
quite literally digging himself out of a hole at the end.
Yep. That's true.
Also, Stephen, I'm not a physics major, but I'm also not a climber.
Mm-hmm.
But if I am suspended from a cabling of some sort,
sure,
and at the bottom of the cabling is something I want not connected to the cabling, and I have a batarang or whatever, where on the rope, where on the cable should I cut the cable?
Yeah, I have no good answer for why you might cut where this particular Batman chose to cut.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I love slow motion somebody falling away from the camera to what could potentially be their death of some sort, right?
Yep.
Like that shot always looks nice, and always looks suspenseful. But I was just like, come on, bro. Like,
yeah. Yeah, definitely not his wisest moment.
Yeah.
So one thing with all this, the twists and turns of the narrative that Batman is uncovering, I loved, by the way, that this movie wound up being so much about the Waynes and the Arkhams. And I'm not a comic book reader, so I literally didn't even know that Arkham was his mother's maiden name. Like, I didn't know where Arkham Asylum
Why are
from.
you saying that name?
Yeah, so I loved all of the active discovery. Again, it felt extremely it was just dark in the perfect way for me. When I said that there are moments of exposition that felt unnecessary, moments where the conversations seemed like they didn't really need to happen, but they happened anyway, it really has to do with the movie does this thing where it plants the idea from the Riddler that Thomas Wayne was a bad man and he got what was coming to him. And then Bruce speaks, or I guess as Bruce, he speaks to Carmine Falcone about what happened with his dad. And Carmine talks for much longer than I would expect a character in this movie to talk, to tell the exact story of what his dad did. And then he has a conversation with Alfred, where Alfred talks for way longer than anyone else in the movie about how your father was actually a good man, and that was the thing he regretted most in his life, and I wished I could have told you sooner, and Carmine is really playing all this up and holding it over him. And if anything to me did a disservice to what the movie was trying to do, it was that like little pivot back and forth. I feel like the idea that Thomas was not wholly evil, but was also not wholly pure, is there in the Riddler's allegation, and it could be there in Batman learning hints of terrible things that happened. But having a character like weep while he describes what a wonderful man Thomas was after it. To me, it felt like it didn't fit in this movie, and I was a little bit cringing at just how far it was going. I don't know. I just felt like everything else in this movie was so good at going unsaid and letting you just feel like a little uneasy about characters and their histories and everything. And that just felt like, no, but hey, audience, you should still feel bad about the guy who died. Like, it felt like less brave than the rest of the movie to me.
Yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, or maybe right before, him and Selena are having a long conversation where she reveals that Carmine is her father. And that also just felt like so much exposition by way of having a character give a monologue. It just didn't feel, it felt like the movie was better than those scenes to me.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it was just there to establish that, you know, Catwoman, Batman, daddy issues, orphan wants to burn down the city. That's
Yep.
that's it's just to juxtapose those two positions. But in all seriousness, I think I'm trying to think. I guess maybe those scenes didn't bother me because I was too bothered by the fact that, like, Alfred doesn't fix the problem. Yes, Thomas Wayne didn't put a hit out on the reporter, but he asked for the involvement in a person who is a criminal, like, mastermind.
Yeah, he asked for a murderer to make a person go away.
Yeah, it's like if I meet a man on a train who tells me a story about killing another man's wife, and then I go like, can you take care of my wife too? Like, I can't argue that, like, well, when I said take care of, I didn't say kill, right? Like,
I hope you're literally referencing the Alfred Hitchcock movie. Otherwise, it is a very interesting coincidence that you picked a train.
yeah, no, I'm trying to.
Okay. Just making sure. I was like, did Chris just, like, write the plot of Strangers on a Train?
That's the point. Is I'm trying to say that, like, if you, like, you can't.
You're still complicit.
Yeah. Like you.
And they were strangers. They didn't even know that guy was so bad.
Yeah, this is like people you know on a train. This is bad guys on a train.
It was like I met a hitman on the train.
yeah. Like if I'm in, like, you know, another Marvel property, and I ask the Kingpin to help me with my competitors in my business of whatever, selling sofas or something. Like, clearly, if I ask, like, a mob boss to help me with a competitor, there's only one way they know how to do that. I have to know that it's not like they're just gonna, like, frame them for tax evasion or something, which is still wrong, right? Like, it doesn't seem like there's a. It seems like what he did, still, his actions directly led to he made a mistake, but he made a stupid decision where he compromised his morals, and that led to both the death of this reporter and his own death. Because after he made the mistake and tried to fix it, he got killed by the guy he was trying to fix the mistake from. So it's to me, it doesn't fix the, like, Bruce can still have the exact same feelings about finding out his father did what he did, because his father still caused directly the death of the person. He just didn't do it with his own hands, which is a distinction, you know, without a difference or whatever. Like, it just...
Right. Yeah, well, I think maybe that's why the Alfred scene rubbed me the wrong way, is, like, it was trying to bend the arc of the story back a little bit or be another grand revelation, but it didn't really reveal anything. And because Robert Pattinson's Bruce Wayne is so inward, I couldn't even feel after that, is he still heavily disappointed in his father, or am I supposed to believe that he feels like Alfred's explanation is, like, exculpatory, which feels tone deaf if true, because, like you pointed out, it definitely does not absolve Thomas Wayne of effectively murdering a person.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the point of those scenes are not for Bruce Wayne, they are for Alfred, right? Like, like, there is this whole side, it's not really a side story, but it's like all these interactions that Bruce has with Alfred, with like, here, use my links. Oh, like, why do your cufflinks say Wayne? Is like, well, your father gave. Like, it is all about his loyalty to the family and him being sort of like the father figure for Bruce when his actual father passed away, and sort of like raising him up to be this better person. It's his way to play into the narrative of like, yeah, I kept the secret, but it's because I was protecting you from the mistakes of your father, and now this is all coming to head. But it felt less about like, don't worry, Bruce, you don't have to win. And it was more like a redemptive arc for him, having sacrificed so much to be a part of this family. I don't know. It's just a thought.
Yeah. Because I think like the story of Thomas Wayne and how Bruce should feel about him is interesting, even with the literal belief that he like partnered with Carmine and semi-knowingly had this reporter killed. Like, we, again, in our history have that. Like, the Kennedys like almost definitely worked with the mob to get themselves elected, and like politicians have done deals with unsavory figures because it helped them get ahead. And like, we have to reckon with like big candidates who like are seen as progressive forces. Like, what did they sacrifice to get the power that they had? And all that is definitely there in like, again, in 2022 political thought about what leaders you praise and what leaders you don't. And I feel like I wish the movie had like just stood by its convictions longer and just let us have to live with the idea that his dad was indirectly a murderer, and not have a moment of redemptive, even though, as you said, maybe the redemptive moment is for Alfred, and Alfred is supposed to be kind of out of touch and blinded by his loyalty. It just like, the movie doesn't play the scene that way. The movie plays the scene as like, Carmine lied to me, and now for the rest of the movie, Carmine is going to be like the ultimate baddie that we have to get rid of.
Well, not the
ultimate, the penultimate, I guess.
Right. I was going to say not the whole rest of the movie.
Yeah.
Because once you bring him into the light, he exits the movie.
So are we meant to believe that until Batman is there, like, what entrance does Carmine Falcone use to get into that bar normally?
Yeah, I think the idea, I don't know. I think it's a weird 3-dimensional chess thing that the Riddler's playing to get like he could have assassinated a person, but I guess you need to assassinate him within the whole view of the people who are theoretically corrupt and under him, so that you can see it. Because if he was just killed off like in a room in the middle of a club and everybody's like, well, I guess he's dead now, it's different than like him being marched out in handcuffs to represent the justice side of bringing him to justice, and then the vengeful side is taken by the other character who just wants to see the world burn. But so that's we're starting to get close to the thing that I really, really want to talk about, which is the one thing that kind of rubbed me a little bit wrong about this film. I understand it from the standpoint of what it means for the Riddler's character. I don't understand it as much for the Batman, and that is this idea that for a hot 30 seconds, we believe that the Riddler is doing this because he knows who Bruce Wayne is, and we're in danger of having the masked justice be unmasked. And then twist, he thinks they're best friends and they've been working together, and he really, really hates Bruce Wayne, but has no fucking clue that Bruce Wayne is Batman.
Really does not know how to read the room in that one moment.
Literally can't read that room. All he had to do was put one hand over over Batman's eyes, and he'd be like, Bruce? Bruce, wait a second. You look familiar to me. Just like that moment when Catwoman is like, I don't know who you are, but I can sure as hell guess you were born rich. And I was like, you have all the pieces you need. Name the richest person you know. Bruce Wayne. Good guess. But anyways, back to this thing. So there are so here's what weirds me out of the story is I thought there were many moments when I thought Bruce was just gonna dox himself. Because, and he could in this world. It's not like with Spider-Man where Peter Parker has to go to high school and graduate and stuff like that. And if somebody reveals his identity, then Aunt May's in trouble, and his girlfriend's in trouble, and his best friend's in trouble. Batman has purposely isolated himself from the rest of the world. He doesn't need an alter ego. He can just be Batman. And sure, maybe the government, if they know Bruce is going to seize his assets or something, and now he won't be able to be as Batman as he was before. But let's be honest, it's 2022. He probably moved everything into crypto anyways. But in all seriousness though, I thought there was going to be a world where he just took off his mask and was like, yo, this is me, deal with it. And then he would just live Bruce Wayne would die and Batman would be Batman forever, right? That was kind of where I thought we were going. So this moment when I kind of expected the way that scene was going to transpire is Riddler thought he was going to win by unmasking Batman, and Batman would just take off his mask and be like, fuck you, I don't even care anymore, I don't need this, or I don't need to remain secret, this is just who I am. I am vengeance, I am the Batman. And instead it's Bruce Wayne. We almost got him. It was just kind of huh? What?
Again, as a movie, I liked that scene because it was toying with me and I enjoyed that. If I would need to watch it a second time to see all the things the Riddler does where he's taunting Batman in the context of sins of the father and the son and everything like that, to really know if I believe the Riddler version of the whole plot. Or if that is kind of like a twist for convenience at the end. I also definitely thought about what does Batman have to lose? He might as well reveal himself. Who's he protecting? I do think though, in the Gotham that we are presented with, Bruce Wayne could not be the hero, could not be vengeance. He represents too much that people hate. So I think unlike in the Nolanverse or pretty much any other Batman movie franchise that I can think of, being Bruce Wayne is a deep shame in this movie. It is a thing that makes you ill-equipped to fight crime, ill-equipped to stop the corruption in the world because you are a part of the problem. And that made me think that him hiding would still make sense. Whereas in almost any other Batman movie, him being Bruce Wayne, it would be the end of Iron Man, right? It would be I'm Iron Man. Yeah. What are you going to do? I'm fucking rich. I can do whatever I want. Here, I think he is, and I don't know where the movie's going in follow-ups in this Batman extended universe that they're going to make, which I think is separate from the DCEU, but it is going to widen still. I don't know if he will continue to be conflicted, if Alfred's love of the Wayne family will be rewarded, or if he's going to kind of if Bruce will want nothing to do with the Wayne family name, and his whole thing is he is going to rebuild the thing that has been tarnished. I don't know. It really depends on what the movie does from here. But I can imagine in future movies, him being Bruce Wayne would not work out so well for him, depending on what they want to talk about.
Yeah.
So how do you feel about, I'm going to butcher his name pronunciation, Barry Keoghan? I think you don't pronounce the G. The Joker. The Joker in the end of this movie.
Reveal guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. He's cool and all if he's gonna steal your magical axe and your and your armor and stuff like that. I don't know how I feel about him as the Joker to this Batman.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by the casting choice, but he feels too much like Paul Dano to me. He feels like he would be the reclusive person, not the incredibly singular, charismatic psychopath.
Yeah.
That the Joker has to be.
And like, let's be honest, he showed up for 10 minutes to record that scene. Maybe they did like 2 takes or whatever. Obviously, I can't really judge his performance based on this one line that he has to deliver, right? In a movie, could be great, but it feels like he, unlike Heath Ledger's Joker and unlike Joaquin Phoenix's Joker, it feels like he is doing an impression of a Joker. Mm-hmm. And those two people inhabited those Jokers. Until I see him inhabit the Joker, I can't really truly judge it, because to me right now it feels like this moment of artifice, which might be completely unfounded when he gets to actually live as that person. But in the moment, it just feels like, yeah, some people call you a clown. We get it. You're the Joker.
Yeah. Well, and also I guess I'm made to believe that, much like many people in this movie, he is not yet who he is going to be. Like I assume this is kind of a character who's locked up in prison, not because he was a masked villain named the Joker with like an alter ego, but because he's a criminal with this like the smiling condition or whatever. Like he has things that are the seed for what will become the Joker, but he hasn't yet turned into the Joker. That was kind of how I read the scene.
Gotcha. Yeah, I just assumed because it was Arkham Prison that like he's already the Joker and he's a loony bin. At the very least, who would call you a clown if you didn't dress like one, right?
Yeah. But does he say that he's been called a clown? I thought he was using the word clown talking to Paul Dano.
I think he was saying something about people don't get you and some might call you a clown or something. But I thought he was just talking like the royal we, like us people who are not... It felt very much... The problem is that this is a line written for the audience. It's not a line that any of those characters would say to each other. It's a line that is meant... It's like I said earlier with Catwoman saying, like, whoever you were, I bet you were born rich. And then like other things like that, where people reference a thing we all know about an individual in a way that is supposed to be like a wink and a nod to who the character is. Like the fact that he's even called I forget what it is, but it's like unseen person in cell or something like that. I don't remember what it's called. But it's like, it's just one that's like, we know who it is. Just fucking say it.
Yeah. Anyway, my prediction is that this is pre-Joker. This is like this is the criminal who will become the Joker, but it hasn't clicked for him yet.
So there is one thing, and I am probably reading way too far into stuff that might never come about, but I almost feel like there's a secret backdoor reference to potential pre-Harley Quinn as well. And here is my justification for that. Obviously, this is just wild speculation, and it's mostly just an interesting thing that I thought was kind of fun. So this film is presented in a noir style, right? Where it's like this detective character speaking to himself about how dark the city is and blah, 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 right? But we find out after like the opening monologue voiceover stuff that this is actually him journaling in his notebook. That is something that he was told to do to help manage his anxieties and fears and stuff like that, right? Mm-hmm. So we find out that Paul Dano does the same thing, albeit way crazier, right? Like he also has his journal notebook that he's been writing in, probably prescribed by a psychologist at some point in time, who could potentially be that both the Batman and the Riddler, both young people at one point in time who lost their parents in some sort of way, were both overseen potentially by a psychologist who could one day become Harley Quinn. It would just be interesting
I hear ya.
if that they were both prescribed to do this journaling exercise to manage their anxieties and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So,
Isn't the background of Scarecrow also supposed to be a psychologist?
I do not remember.
I feel like it is.
I just thought it was a guy that got, stuck in a cornfield on a stick and then had to...
Had to wish for a brain.
Yeah. But yeah, anyways, I just thought it was interesting, the parallel of the journaling. And just retroactively, I'm trying to work it into more character references.
I like it. No, I like the theory. I think it's cool. One problem I have with modern, post 9/11 Batmans is after Joker. Honestly, though, I wouldn't have even thought Riddler was possible in these universes. It's like Joker, Penguin as like a mob guy, and maybe Two-Face. Like, I can't think of a lot of villains that would fit in the gritty neo-realist version of Batman. Like Mr. Freeze, how does that fit in this universe, right?
Yeah.
Like they would have to do something really clever and interesting to make it work. Same with Harley. I don't see a Harley Quinn fitting in this universe.
I feel like the way you do a Mr. Freeze is closer to the way Nolan did Bane, which is a person, something happens, they have this rare genetic condition, and they have to wear a suit that keeps their core body temperature below some certain amount, right? Where it's literally they're in a barometric chamber and you know what I mean, something like that, right? That just seems like the way you kind of do it.
Yeah, it just that still seems like their core villainness, like their power wouldn't be from that anymore.
Yeah.
Or else it would no longer be a realist world. Like Bane, his power was being really, really strong. So even though the things around him, they managed to make more realistic, they didn't need to worry about his power. That was what it was.
Yeah.
When I think about what I understand, which is mostly informed by cartoons and Tim Burton of Poison Ivy or Mr. Freeze or things like that, I just don't get how they would work in this world. But I don't know how. I wouldn't have known the Riddler until Matt Reeves showed it to me. So.
But
can do it.
Even Poison Ivy, right? She wouldn't have to have make plants grow powers, right? She could just be a person who loves poison and owns a nursery where a bunch of the plants she has are whatever the poison plant is from Breaking Bad, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a way that they could be metaphorically the embodiment of the character without having to have any sort of special abilities or something like that. Maybe Mr. Freeze just owns one of those nightclubs where everything is ice.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And the Penguin slides around there.
Croc. I want them to find a way to do a realist take on Killer Croc. I think that would excite me. I always like the action figure of him.
Yeah. I want the realist take on Clayface.
Oh, yeah. That would be cool.
Clayface was always fun. All right. Well, that probably about does it for our spoiler segment for the Batman. So obviously, Stephen, you're up for future Batsman.
Oh yeah. But I still will probably not watch whatever TV series they inevitably release.
Oh yeah. One other thing I want to say. Didn't production of this get shut down at some point because either Robert Pattinson or his stunt double wiped out on a motorcycle at some point? I could have sworn that I heard something about that back in the day, and that was in the back of my head. And as I watched this film with it just constantly pouring rain and people on motorcycles, I was like, yeah, no shit.
Yeah.
It looked cool as hell, but I was like, this is just dangerous as hell. Why does everybody have to ride a motorcycle?
Well, so did they... I need to pay more attention. Was it actually raining all the time in this movie, or did they add it in post? I guess we do really see his hair be drenched.
Yeah. I think it's probably not raining as hard as it looks like it is, but they're definitely pouring rain on sets as they do it.
Right. Yeah. I don't remember that particular narrative. The one that I wanted to ask you about, and this is more just a thought experiment for you, is originally the plan was for this to be Ben Affleck movie, and Ben Affleck was going to direct and co-write it in addition to starring in it. And then he, presumably it was his decision, decided to back off the project. Knowing how the movie turned out, but then also thinking about movies like The Town and Ben Affleck's own kind of proclivity for like gritty, uncomfortable, crime-related movies, it's interesting to wonder what the Affleck directed version of this would have been like.
Yeah, it's such a different character than his, and maybe that's what his point was, is, hey, I did this Snyderverse Batman, and that was not the Batman I wanted to do, so I wanted to do this other one. But I think I don't know, I really like this version of it, and I'm a fan of, I've seen some people online being like, oh, emo Batman sucks. And to that I say, you suck, person who said that.
Yeah, emo Batman's great.
He's the best Batman.
Like, I'm not saying imagine Ben Affleck starring in it. I'm interested in thinking about if he directed the movie, what it would be like. If this were, Gone Baby Gone Batman, if this were The Town Batman, I don't know. I feel like there's an interesting way in which it actually fits in his directorial choices would actually work well for this movie and maybe not change it that much, but who knows? I guess he usually stars in everything he makes, so it would be hard to separate those two things.
Yeah. Cool. Any last thoughts?
Nope.
All right. Well, thanks everybody for listening, and we've got other episodes already in the can that we'll be releasing after this. We sort of held them off so that we could get this Batman review out, so hopefully you enjoyed it.
Bye.